Depuis quelques mois, nous avons pris l'habitude, à travers les rendez-vous avec Roch, de partager des interrogations, de nous interroger notamment sur la nature du monde dans lequel nous vivons et sur la nature même de l'humanité. Au stade où nous en sommes de notre questionnement, je pense que le moment est venu de partager avec vous l'échange que j'ai eu avec un chercheur américain particulièrement pertinent et qui répond au nom de Crrow777. Bonjour Crrow, je suis très heureux de pouvoir te présenter aux internautes français et pour commencer, pourrais-tu nous parler un peu de ton parcours?
Okay, hello, Roch. Thanks for having me. At the end of the 80s, I served in the United States Marine Corps up until the first Gulf War. After that, I had a number of jobs. One of the longest running jobs I held through much of the 90s. I was a freelance stagehand, setting up stages, sound, audio, lights for some of the biggest rock acts. After that, I went back to school for, I don't know, my fourth or fifth time and got a degree in internet technology. And I worked all the way up until the 9/11 attacks in one capacity or another doing digital work. I basically became a freelancer, worked mostly on computers and worked for corporations up until roughly the economy crashed, though I was kind of working for myself prior to 2008. But when the economy in America crashed in 2008, I basically walked away from corporate life to pursue what I'm doing now. I became very interested in trying to find out some reality about this world, and though I had been doing that since probably my late 20s, actually maybe even my mid-20s, I began to use the telescope a lot more. That started in 2011 I was using a little bit, but it got serious in 2012 when I filmed the lunar wave, and that started because I had filmed some black triangles transiting the moon.
Donc, tu as, si je comprends bien, tu as cette passion pour l'astronomie depuis pas mal de temps. Tu t'es équipé en télescope vers 2010, puis arrive 2012, et en 2012, tu fais une découverte.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, in the 90s, I spent a lot of my life following what NASA was telling me and believing that to be true. I did astrophotography at that time, trying to replicate images from things like the Hubble telescope, which I later came to find out was a fraud. And then when I filmed the lunar wave, which you just alluded to in 2012, I became very serious.
Cette vague lunaire, quand tu la découvres, quelles sont les répercussions immédiates chez toi et aussi quelles sont les circonstances finalement de cette découverte?
First off, on the supermoon of 2012, which I believe was in May, I've forgotten, I filmed a bunch of black triangles transiting the moon. The night that I filmed the lunar wave, I was trying to film things transiting the moon. What happened that night was I was out filming a full moon, which very few people do. In astronomy, you're told that it's not much to see on a full moon, but I was trying to capture strange objects. What happened was, as I panned the telescope below the moon and the lunar wave started, I did not notice it as I began to pan back up to center on the moon, and then the lunar wave caught up to my telescope, at which time I did see it.
Oui, c'est vrai qu'à cette époque, quand on filme la Lune, on est plutôt en train de chercher des objets particuliers, des éclats, des lueurs. Et puis toi, voilà, tout d'un coup, il y a cette vague. Cette vague, la première fois que je l'ai vue, bon, c'était tellement énorme, je dois t'avouer que je n'y ai pas cru.
So, I mean, that's completely understandable. When I first saw the wave, it started, I didn't see it, I panned the camera up above it, then the wave caught up to the camera and I did see it. My first reaction was that it must be some kind of a equipment failure, but that didn't sit right with me because I have a digital background. But like you, the first time I saw it, I tried to explain it away.
Oui, c'est tellement inattendu ce que tu as filmé ce jour-là que, en fait, on n'arrive même pas à comprendre ces images. Parce que jusqu'à présent, comme je le disais, quand on filme la Lune, c'est pour filmer des objets, des lueurs, des anomalies. Puis, tout d'un coup, cette vague lunaire nous fait vraiment basculer dans autre chose.
Right. So what actually happened was I reached over to delete the clip And for some reason I did not, and that is unusual. It is also unusual that I panned the telescope below the moon because I always try to keep centered on the moon. But what happened was, is I saved the clip, and for quite a while, weeks, I kept going back to look at it, and finally one day I deleted it from my computer. And as I laid down to go to sleep that night, I had the epiphany where I understood all at once what the camera pan meant, and I ran back out to the computer and restored the image, and I was stunned, and actually it scared me a bit. Because of the camera pan, I understood that it was a filmed event, and that's when the real research started.
Et donc, quelques temps plus tard, tu arrives de nouveau à filmer le même phénomène.
Okay, so I filmed it in 2012, and I didn't post it online for anyone to see, although I did have people who I considered to be smart or expert look at it. When I finally posted in 2013, everyone attacked me, saying that I had faked it, that it was equipment failure, all these things. But that was quite a bit later, and I'd had a lot of time to study it. But I had not yet filmed it again. I did not film the lunar wave again for a year and a half. That was the next time that the lunar wave was filmed.
Le fait que tu aies gardé cette vidéo pendant un an, pour moi, qui ai eu l'occasion dans d'autres registres, hein, de me comporter de la même façon, cela rend ton témoignage vraiment très crédible.
Thank you. The critical thing here is in all that time, I had time to research. While everyone was attacking me and no one would believe that it was a real event, I knew from the camera pan alone that it was a filmed event. But then later on, a video engineer demonstrated that there was enough ambient light in the clip, because it was shot around 8:30 in the evening, that the wave didn't cross the video frame. And then a little while after that, we detected the energy pulses that are visible in the 2012 footage.
Oui, et par la suite, d'autres chercheurs de vérité ont réussi à leur tour à capturer le même phénomène. Et pour toi, ça, je suppose que ça a été une libération, non?
It was. I had been attacked, and then after a year and a half went by, I had been saying all along, something intuitive in me understood that it was connected to equinoxes. And actually, before I filmed the lunar wave, I had been talking about the importance of equinoxes. So when I filmed it again a year and a half later at the spring equinox, that was the second capture. Then people say that I'm the only one who's filmed it, so it was clearly faked. And then finally, the man from Germany had a rather unusual catch, maybe not as evident as some of the other ones, but finally someone else caught it. It was a guy from Germany named Gustav.
Et quelle interprétation fais-tu de ce phénomène? Est-ce que tu penses que ce phénomène est un phénomène récent ou plutôt ancien?
It's hard to know the answer to that for sure, but my guess is that it's probably been going on for quite some time. And being a digital person and a person who'd been using telescopes since the mid-90s, good telescopes, when I filmed it, I almost deleted the clip. Turns out that later on, some of the captures that we found, there was a guy who had a YouTube channel with one of the waves that we used posted. He'd shot that in 2013, and it was in the clip. He didn't know it was anything special. So to answer you, my guess is it's probably been going on for as long as the moon is what it is now.
D'accord. Moi, je suis tout à fait d'accord avec toi, Crrow. Mais en même temps, on ne peut pas exclure d'autres pistes. D'autres personnes vont parler d'autres sujets. Et ils vont affirmer, par exemple, que le poste central de commandement du système HARP se trouve sur la Lune. Personnellement, moi, je n'adhère pas forcément à cette vision, mais est-ce que tu penses que ça pourrait être lié au système HARP?
No, not in my opinion. Although the way that Roch phrased that question implies that if someone could be on the moon, the wave is generated there, which does match some of the evidence, which shows the video or the wave is not crossing the video frame. If HARP or some other kind of frequency creating device was doing this, presumably we should be able to see it across stars or the sun or anything else. But here's the real problem in my view. I think we can demonstrate that no rocket goes above what we call low Earth orbit. I think we can demonstrate the International Space Station is fraud, that it's basically made in Hollywood special. And I think we can demonstrate that the moon landing never happened. When you look at all the ancillary information that we can investigate separate from the lunar wave, we get a picture that nobody is leaving this planet beyond what we call low Earth orbit, to include satellites.
Oui, je pense la même chose, oui, en effet. Mais est-ce que tu sais qu'au début des années 2000, il y a eu une vidéo prise par satellite qui montre une vague similaire qui parcourt toute la Terre du pôle Nord au pôle Sud. Alors nous, on avait, avec Top Secret, on avait publié cette vidéo il y a environ une dizaine d'années.
I have not seen that video. I have seen some where there's a similar kind of shock wave. It doesn't look quite the same, and it travels much quicker from bombs or explosions, but I have not seen the video you're referencing.
Non, en fait, c'était une vague électromagnétique qui descendait du pôle Nord vers le pôle Sud, parcourant toute la Terre. Enfin, c'est assez intéressant de se poser la question, en fait, est-ce que ce phénomène ne peut pas affecter d'autres planètes, d'autres corps astraux?
Right, okay. I can point you to a video that I uploaded on April 4th. The title of the video is Lunar Wave Displaces the Entire Moon Twice. What I finally did, it's something I talked about for a while, and sharp-eyed followers knew about it. I took the time to zoom in on some landmarks on the moon. By the way, I do not accept that the moon is a rock in space, but I zoomed in on craters as the 2012 lunar wave goes by, and you can see it displace everything. The entire image of the moon is displaced twice by the lunar wave. So when we consider that it's some kind of a wave, like I'm sure if you looked at the video he's describing on Earth, everything you're looking at is not displaced.
Oui, non, en effet, la vidéo que j'avais vue à l'époque, il y a 10 ans à peu près, même peut-être un peu plus de 10 ans, donnait plus l'air d'une reconstitution en 3D de choses qui étaient captées sur la Terre par des radars. C'est pour ça d'ailleurs que je parle de champs électromagnétiques. C'est vrai que parler de vidéos satellites, dans ce cas-là, on était plutôt dans l'ordre du dessin quand même.
I see. Well, that brings us to another point. We live in the high definition age, and in my view, that means that anything amazing that can be filmed will be filmed, which is a lot of evidence that we can glean, proving that rockets are not leaving low Earth orbit, proving that we didn't go to the moon, proving a lot of things. My point being is that if the lunar wave was created by some man-made thing, presumably people would be filming it a lot. And yet I made the prediction it happens at equinoxes, and this turned out to be true. And I made this prediction right after the first capture. Most of the waves have been filmed at the spring equinox, a couple after the summer solstice, and then a couple at the fall equinox.
Personnellement, je ne pense pas que ce soit forcément quelque chose provoqué par l'homme. Qu'est-ce que tu en penses?
That's a very difficult question to answer. And the problem is because whatever I say here, I want to be careful not to imply that aliens are doing this. Because there's no evidence. Like I said, this is the HD age. We have really no evidence to support that. While I think it's hard to imagine that human beings are the only game in town, I can say this. We seem to live in a closed system where even the ruling class, the people with all the power and the money, people who run NASA, they can't leave this planet. So then the question becomes, why? How did this occur? And to be completely honest, for those who are listening, I can't answer that. I don't know how we got here or how this closed system came to be.
Merci de cette réponse. Je partage vraiment ton avis, Crrow. Est-ce que tu penses que ce phénomène que tu as filmé, qui peut se produire sur d'autres corps du système solaire, peut avoir un lien avec une sorte de remise à jour de la matrice dans laquelle nous vivons, un équilibrage dimensionnel des corps astraux que nous voyons dans cette zone de la matrice?
I think that's quite possible. The problem with just kind of agreeing that it's a matrix update is a bit like when people use the word Illuminati. It doesn't mean anything. And when we say the word matrix, everyone thinks of the film, which is probably a really good allegory for what this world actually is. But when I shot the wave the first time, by the time I understood that it was a filmed event, I instinctually understood that there was some connection to the equinoxes. In my mind, that could in fact be when a system update is done. But to say that implies that there are either human beings so advanced that they have built this huge contained system, or that God did it, or that aliens did it. And I'm not satisfied with any of those answers because there's no evidence to point in any one of those directions.
Ça pourrait être le moyen de tenir la zone où nous sommes d'un point de vue fréquentiel, vibratoire. C'est-à-dire de temps en temps, il y a peut-être besoin de syntoniser les différents corps du système solaire.
So I guess he's saying that there is a solar system and this is part of what keeps it working properly. Is that right?
Non, je pense le monde, évidemment, je pense le monde en termes de dimensions. Il y a plusieurs dimensions, et pour que le monde que nous connaissons, que nous voyons, reste cohérent, il y a parfois besoin d'accorder les planètes comme on accorde un instrument de musique, pour faire une image cohérente de celui-ci. Un peu comme le concevaient les anciens.
I see. Well, I do agree with the illusion statement there, for certain. And for the record, I have used the term octaves, as in music, to try to describe the lunar wave and what's going on with both the sun and the moon. But I do not accept the description of the planets that we've been handed. I do not accept the description of this world. I think it has all been intentionally misdescribed. Having said this, if we look at octaves, the idea of octave, there's a closed system here, and a lot of people try to say there's a dome, or religious people like to say it's the firmament. There's a lot of religious texts that back up that idea. I had considered that if we were tuned to a certain frequency or octave, and what's above what we call our atmosphere was tuned to a different octave or frequency, that in itself would create the cage. We couldn't leave. And I had done research with a supposed man named Hadibao in Russia, but I walked away from that research. But in that research, he does talk about octaves. And I've always thought that that idea is probably a useful idea.
Tout à fait. Il est évident que nous vivons dans une illusion, que nous percevons ce que nous voyons à travers notre ADN, mais qu'en réalité, le monde dans lequel nous vivons réellement est un monde de fréquences, de dimensions, d'énergie. En tout cas, il est clair que ce que l'on voit est une simulation, et l'ADN est une sorte de décodeur, d'interface.
I think that many of us who have researched in the way that I have, and the way that it sounds like Roch has, understand that there's a ruling class. If anything we have found out about the ruling class is correct, it means that they've had all the good information, all the power, all the money, all the important ancient information for Lord knows how long. If this is true, it is possible that they began to elevate as human beings and retarded the rest of us in every way they could by putting fluoride in water, giving us bad food. Who knows what chemtrails are doing? The point I would make is I think it's quite possible that what we call the ruling class is almost like a different species now, because they have advanced while they have done everything they can to retard the rest of us. And they may have figured out or acquired ancient information that allowed them to manipulate the system that we all live in.
Je crois personnellement qu'un des plus grands secrets qu'il préserve, c'est justement le fait de nous maintenir dans cette illusion et de ne pas nous faire comprendre que dans un monde d'illusions, en réalité, tout est possible. Il suffit juste d'être convaincu de cela. Évidemment, évidemment, je pense que cela commence par un combat avec nous-mêmes, un combat contre nous-mêmes. Il faut, ben, quelque part, il faut déverrouiller ce qu'il y a à l'intérieur de nous et qui nous convainc constamment que nous ne pouvons rien.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on. I've often said that every brain cycle a human being wastes on things that don't matter is a brain cycle that didn't improve his standing as a human being. And to put a fine point on it, here in the United States, all through last year, there were so many false flag attacks put into the news to keep people afraid and to keep them paying attention to false events. So what we see from the ruling class, and by the way, my hearts go out to the people of France because I know you recently experienced a similar thing. I would just say, as long as people are led astray by false news, by fear, by any number of things that the ruling class puts out through the media or any number of ways, we have diminished our chance of becoming what a human being can become. And I agree with Roch that the potential of a human being is vast. And if we were allowed to discover that, then it would not be easy to lie to us anymore, because as we advance, that would not be a possible way to fool us.
Oui, c'est pour ça que la découverte que tu as faite est si importante, car elle nous conduit vers la piste d'une libération. Elle met le doigt sur une réalité, et celle qui veut que le monde dans lequel nous vivons porte en lui la marque de l'illusion. Et c'est ça qui est très fort dans ton document.
That's right. And what we find is that, as happened to me, as happened to Roch, the first time that we saw the lunar wave, as human beings, we tried to explain it away. The reason this happens is because we've been trained our whole lives to think in an acceptable way. I no longer do that. And at the time the lunar wave happened, if I would not have been concerned with being what society considers reasonable, I may have been able to think in a more helpful way to understand that this is in fact an illusion. Now, when we say illusion, I'm not saying that the moon doesn't exist. What I'm saying is it doesn't exist in the way that you've been taught that it exists. It's not a rock in space. I have called it a hologram. I have called it a facade. The problem is we don't have the language to describe it, and people get hung up on how a hologram would work or if God put the light there. What I now say is that it is a light, it is not a rock in space, and it is not possible for a human being to walk on it.
Eh ben, effectivement, nous sommes obligés de trouver des mots pour décrire ces choses. Évidemment que l'exercice de la traduction n'est pas des plus faciles pour utiliser des termes très précis. Et je pense tout de même que nous devons combattre le dragon, entre guillemets, le dragon avec ses armes. Et une de ses armes, c'est la raison, la logique. Et si nous arrivons à le vaincre en lui montrant par la logique que sa logique est fausse, alors nous pourrons sans doute passer à l'étape suivante de cette révolution qui se prépare, en tout cas je l'espère.
I would just like to say, I've said this many times, belief is the enemy of knowing. Belief is a thing that human beings enter into with no investigation mostly, and once a human being believes something, it's often very hard to unbelieve that thing. The people who run the show, presumably people, one of the main tools that they use against us is to get us to believe that which is false is true and that which is true is false. So if human beings want to stand up and make a difference, they don't need to start a revolution. They don't need to buy a gun. They don't need to form a group. They need to do one simple thing. They need to change their minds. The way that people can do this is to stop believing the things that they are told. It doesn't hurt you to do this. It doesn't hurt anyone to do this. If you can stop believing, then there is a chance that your brain will switch over to the way a human being should think, and you will begin to realize the false construct.
Crrow, j'espère aussi que nous aurons l'occasion de discuter encore ensemble prochainement pour suivre l'évolution de cette révolution en marche.
Certainly. Thank you, Roch, so much for having me.
Je précise à l'attention des internautes qu'il s'agit bien du dragon qui est en nous, que moi j'appelle l'ego. En tout cas, merci beaucoup, Crrow. Merci et j'espère que c'est vraiment que ce n'est vraiment que le début de nos échanges et que ces échanges que nous aurons ensemble par la suite, je l'espère en tout cas, déboucheront sur une très belle révolution intérieure. C'est en tout cas l'objectif des rendez-vous avec Roch que je donne assez régulièrement maintenant avec les internautes français. Merci et à très bientôt.